Blood stained the hem of Katherine Foster's wedding dress as she stumbled through the canyons of New Mexico Territory in 1876, the betrayal still fresh as the wound in her heart. 6 hours earlier, she had watched her husband of 3 years, Thomas Bailey, take another bride at the very church where they had once exchanged their own vows. Catherine's hands trembled as she gripped the rough sandstone wall of the canyon for support. The desert wind whipped her honey-brown hair across her tear-streaked face. 3 years of marriage, all their shared dreams of building a cattle ranch, gone in an instant when Thomas decided the banker's daughter would be a more advantageous match. Katherine had fled the ceremony, humiliated and heartbroken, with nowhere to go in a territory where a woman alone was as vulnerable as a newborn calf during coyote season. "You're a long way from town, madam," a deep voice called from above. Katherine startled, nearly losing her footing on the rocky ground. She looked up to see a man on horseback silhouetted against the setting sun. His broad shoulders were draped in a weather-worn duster, and the brim of his Stetson cast shadows across his face. "I'm not going back," Katherine said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Not ever." The stranger dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent his life in the saddle. As he approached, Katherine could see his face clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 28 or 29, with intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through her disguise of composure. A thick scar ran along his jawline, telling stories of hardship without words. "Isaac Aldridge," he said, tipping his hat. "And I'm not suggesting you go back, just noting that these canyons aren't friendly to folks without water or a horse." He gestured to a canteen hanging from his saddle. "Care to tell me what brings a woman in a wedding dress to Rattlesnake Canyon at sunset?" Katherine straightened her spine, summoning what dignity she had left. "My husband took another bride today, at our church, in front of everyone we know." Isaac's eyes narrowed as he studied her face. "And you're still wearing your wedding dress because—" "It wasn't my wedding," Katherine said bitterly. "It was his to her. I wore this to remind everyone of his broken promises." A ghost of a smile played across Isaac's lips. "Bold move." "Foolish move," Katherine corrected. "Now I have nowhere to go. The ranch was his family's land." "I have no family left in the territory." Isaac looked at her for a long moment, then glanced at the darkening sky. "Night's coming fast. My camp is just over that ridge. You can rest there while you figure out your next move." Katherine hesitated. Trusting a stranger was dangerous, but dying alone in the desert seemed the more immediate threat. "I'm not in the habit of harming women, Mrs. Foster," she said, reverting to her maiden name without thinking. "Katherine Foster." Isaac nodded. "Well, Mrs. Foster, I promise you'll be safer with me than alone in these canyons after dark." As they walked toward his camp, Isaac leading his horse behind them, Katherine caught him looking at her dress again. "Your husband," he said finally. "What's his name?" "Thomas Bailey," Katherine replied. "He owns the Double B Ranch north of Silver Creek." Isaac stopped walking so abruptly that his horse nearly bumped into him. "Thomas Bailey," he repeated, his voice suddenly hard as iron. "Tall fellow with a scar above his right eye." Katherine nodded, surprised. "You know him?" Isaac's face darkened. "We've crossed paths." He started walking again, his stride longer and more purposeful. "So Thomas Bailey discarded his wife for a new one. That's interesting." Something in his tone made Katherine shiver despite the lingering heat of the day. "What's your business with my husband?" "Ex-husband," Isaac corrected. "And let's just say your Thomas took something from me once, something I can't get back." They crested the ridge, and Katherine saw a small camp nestled between two large boulders. A fire pit was already arranged, though not yet lit, and a bedroll lay beside it. "Your husband took another bride," Isaac said, helping her down the slope with a gentleness that belied the hardness in his eyes. "Then I'll take his greatest loss." Katherine stopped. "What does that mean?" Isaac looked at her, the dying sunlight reflecting in his eyes. "It means, Mrs. Foster, that fate has interesting ways of settling scores. Now let's get a fire going before the cold sets in." As Isaac busied himself with the fire, Katherine sat on a flat rock, her mind racing. Was this chance meeting truly fate or something more deliberate? She watched Isaac's methodical movements as he stacked kindling, his hands strong and sure. "How do you know Thomas?" she asked when the silence became too heavy. Isaac didn't look up from his task. "We were partners once back in '71. Had a claim up in the mountains, silver strike that could have made us both rich men." The spark caught and flames began to lick at the dry wood. "Until Thomas decided he wanted it all." Katherine's throat tightened. "What happened?" "I woke up one morning with a gun to my head and my partner telling me our claim was his now." Isaac stood, the firelight throwing his scar into sharp relief. "He left me for dead in those mountains, took everything my share of the claim, my horse, my supplies." "I don't believe you," Katherine said automatically, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. Thomas's sudden wealth when they'd met, his vague explanations about lucky investments, it all made terrible sense. "Don't need you to believe me, Mrs. Foster." Isaac sat across from her, the fire between them. "Truth stands on its own." Katherine stared into the flames. "If what you say is true, why haven't you gone after him before now?" "I spent a year recovering. By the time I could ride again, he'd sold the claim and vanished." Isaac poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Took me this long to track him down. And now what? You'll kill him." Katherine's hands trembled around the warm cup. "Is that why you're helping me? To use me to get to Thomas?" Isaac's laugh was without humor. "Mrs. Foster, I found you wandering alone in a canyon wearing a wedding dress. I'd have helped any woman in that state, vendetta or no." He took a drink from his own cup. "As for Thomas, killing him would be too quick. I want him to lose everything, just like I did." "Then we want the same thing," Katherine said softly, surprising herself with the admission. The night deepened around them as Katherine told Isaac about her marriage to Thomas, how they'd met when she was teaching at the Silver Creek schoolhouse, how he'd courted her with promises of a beautiful life on his ranch, and how those promises had gradually revealed themselves as lies. "He never loved me," she concluded, staring into the dying embers of the fire. "I was convenient, a respectable wife who could help him establish himself in the community, but Eliza Thornton comes with her father's bank behind her." Isaac watched her across the fire. "What will you do now?" Katherine looked up at the stars, countless and cold above them. "I don't know. I have a little money saved. Maybe I'll go east, try to find work as a teacher again." "Or," Isaac said carefully, "you could help me." "Help you what? Take everything from him?" Isaac leaned forward. "You know his business, his routines, his weaknesses. Together, we could ruin him completely." Katherine should have been shocked by the suggestion, should have recoiled from such vengeance. Instead, she felt a surge of something dark and satisfying. "How?" Isaac smiled, and in the firelight, it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "First, we need to understand what he values most." "The ranch," Katherine said immediately. "And now his new wife and her family connections. Then that's where we start." Isaac stood and moved around the fire to sit beside her. "But not tonight. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we plan." He offered her his bedroll and promised to keep watch through the night. As Katherine lay down, exhaustion finally claiming her, she wondered what kind of woman she was becoming, one who would conspire with a stranger against the man she had once loved enough to marry. But as sleep took her, another thought surfaced. Perhaps this was who she had always been, beneath the layers of propriety and expectation, a woman who refused to be discarded. The morning sun found Katherine washing her face in a small stream near Isaac's camp. She had torn away the mudded hem of her wedding dress, leaving it ankle length. The white fabric was stained and wrinkled beyond repair, but it was all she had to wear. "We need to get you some proper clothes," Isaac said, approaching with 2 tin plates of beans and salt pork. "Can't exactly blend in wearing that." Katherine accepted the plate gratefully. "Blend in where, Silver Creek?" Isaac sat beside her on a flat rock. "We're going back to town." Katherine nearly choked on her food. "I can't go back there. Everyone saw me at the wedding. I made quite a scene." "Exactly why it's perfect," Isaac said. "No one will expect you to return so soon. Besides, we need supplies, information, and allies. Silver Creek is the place to find all three." Katherine shook her head. "You don't understand. I have no friends there anymore. Thomas made sure of that. When we married, I moved to his ranch away from town. He discouraged visitors." Isaac's eyes darkened. "Isolated you." Katherine nodded, a lump forming in her throat. It was the first time anyone had named what Thomas had done. Said it was proper for a rancher's wife to focus on the ranch. "I didn't realize until too late that he was cutting off my connections." Isaac reached out hesitantly, then placed his hand over hers. "All the more reason to go back and reclaim what he took from you." His touch was warm, calloused from hard work but gentle in intent. Katherine found herself not pulling away despite the impropriety. After all, what did propriety matter now? "I'll need more than a torn wedding dress if we're going back," she said finally. Isaac smiled. "I have a plan for that too." They rode double on Isaac's horse, Katherine sitting behind him with her arms wrapped around his waist. It was scandalously intimate, but practical. They had only one horse between them, and the alternative was for Katherine to walk the 15 miles back to town. As they rode, Isaac explained his background further. He had been a Texas Ranger before partnering with Thomas on the Silver Claim, skilled with both guns and tracking. After Thomas's betrayal, he'd worked as a bounty hunter, which had eventually led him back to Thomas's trail. "I arrived in Silver Creek 2 days ago," he told her. "Was watching Thomas, learning his routine when I saw the wedding announcement in the town paper. I was at the church yesterday at the back, saw you make your entrance." "And exit," Katherine added wryly. "That too." She could hear the smile in his voice. "That's when I lost track of you. Took me hours to pick up your trail in the canyons." "You were looking for me specifically?" Katherine asked, surprised. "I was curious about the woman brave enough to confront Thomas Bailey in front of the whole town," Isaac admitted. "Thought you might be useful to know. Never expected to find you half dead in Rattlesnake Canyon." They stopped at a small homestead about 3 miles outside of Silver Creek. An older woman named Martha Jenkins lived there alone, her husband having died in the war between the states. Isaac seemed to know her, greeting her warmly as they approached her modest cabin. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is Katherine Foster," Isaac said. "She's in need of some assistance." Martha's sharp eyes took in Katherine's torn wedding dress, but she asked no questions. Instead, she simply nodded and ushered Katherine inside. "Let's get you out of that dress and into something more practical," Martha said, leading Katherine to a small bedroom. "I have some things that might fit you." An hour later, Katherine emerged wearing a simple blue calico dress, her hair neatly braided and pinned up. Martha had even provided a carpet bag with some essential items: a nightgown, a spare set of undergarments, and a hairbrush. "I can never repay your kindness," Katherine said as they prepared to leave. Martha waved her hand dismissively. "Any friend of Isaac's is a friend of mine. He saved my Robert's life during the war, brought him home to me for his final years." I owe him more than I can ever repay." As they rode away, Katherine pressed closer to Isaac's back. "You didn't tell me you were a war hero." "I'm not," Isaac said shortly. "I was just a young soldier who helped a wounded man get home. Nothing heroic about it." But Katherine had seen the respect in Martha's eyes, and she suspected there was more to the story than Isaac was willing to share. They reached Silver Creek by mid-afternoon. Isaac took them to the far side of town, away from the main street, stopping at a small boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. "I've been staying here," he explained as he helped Katherine dismount. "Mrs. Fletcher doesn't ask questions, and the back staircase means you can come and go without being seen." The room Isaac had rented was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chair by the window. Katherine stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their arrangement. Isaac seemed to read her thoughts. "I'll sleep on the floor," he said quickly. "Or find another room if you prefer." Katherine shook her head. "No, this is fine. We need to conserve our resources." She set Martha's carpet bag on the chair. "Besides, after sleeping on the ground last night, even a floor will seem luxurious." Isaac grinned. "That's the spirit." As evening approached, Isaac left to gather information in town while Katherine rested. When he returned, he brought a small supper of bread, cheese, and apples, along with news. "Word of your dramatic exit from the wedding has spread throughout the county," he reported as they ate by lamplight. "Thomas is furious, claiming you've gone mad with jealousy. The new Mrs. Bailey is playing the sympathetic stepmother, saying she hopes you'll find peace." Katherine's hand tightened around her piece of bread. "Stepmother, I have no children." Isaac's expression changed. "Actually, according to town gossip, Eliza is already with child. That's why the wedding happened so quickly." The bread turned to ash in Katherine's mouth. Thomas had refused to consider children with her, claiming the time wasn't right, that they needed to establish the ranch first. Now, Eliza Thornton was carrying his child after what must have been months of betrayal. "Katherine," Isaac said softly, using her given name for the first time. "Are you all right?" She looked up, tears burning in her eyes but refusing to fall. "No," she answered honestly, "but I will be. After we take everything from him." Isaac nodded, his eyes reflecting the lamplight. "I also learned something else. Thomas is hosting a party at the ranch next weekend, a proper introduction of his new wife to the county's important families." "The perfect time for us to strike," Katherine said, surprising herself with her eagerness. "Yes," Isaac agreed, "but we need to be careful. Acting out of pure emotion will only hurt our cause. We need a plan that ruins him completely and legally." They spent the night discussing possibilities, mapping out Thomas's vulnerabilities. Katherine revealed that Thomas kept all his important papers in a safe in his study, including the deed to the ranch and records of his business dealings. "If we could get access to those papers, we might find evidence of his betrayal of you," Katherine suggested. "Something that proves he stole your claim." Isaac looked thoughtful. "Possibly, but we need a way into that party and into his study." Katherine smiled for the first time since Isaac had found her in the canyon. "Leave that to me." Over the next few days, Katherine and Isaac refined their plan. Katherine sent a message to Lucy Williams, her one remaining friend in town, a woman who had been sympathetic to Katherine even after most of society had sided with Thomas. Lucy agreed to meet Katherine secretly. "Oh, Katherine," Lucy exclaimed when they met in the back room of her husband's mercantile store. "Everyone's talking about what happened at the wedding. Are you truly all right?" Katherine squeezed her friend's hands. "I'm surviving, Lucy, but I need your help." Lucy didn't hesitate. "Anything." Katherine explained that she needed to attend the party at the ranch, but in disguise. Lucy, who had received an invitation along with her husband James, agreed to help sneak Katherine in as her lady's maid. "James won't approve," Lucy admitted, "but what he doesn't know won't hurt him. He'll be too busy trying to secure a cattle contract with Thomas to notice what I'm doing." With Lucy's help, Katherine obtained a proper maid's uniform and information about which guests would be attending. Isaac, meanwhile, found work as a stable hand at the Double B Ranch, using a different name and keeping his hat low to avoid recognition from Thomas. "The ranch hands are unhappy," Isaac reported after his first day. "Thomas has been cutting corners, paying less than promised. Seems his new father-in-law's money hasn't materialized as expected." "That doesn't surprise me," Katherine said. "Howard Thornton is known for driving hard bargains. He wouldn't give his daughter's husband money without strings attached." As the day of the party approached, Katherine grew increasingly nervous. She hadn't set foot on the Double B Ranch since fleeing the wedding. The thought of returning, even in disguise, made her stomach knot with anxiety. The night before the party, she sat on the edge of the bed in their rented room, twisting her hands in her lap. Isaac, who had been cleaning his revolver at the small table, noticed her distress. "We don't have to go through with this," he said, setting the gun aside. "We can find another way." Katherine shook her head. "No, this is our best chance. I'm just scared." Isaac crossed the room to sit beside her. "Of Thomas, of failing," Katherine admitted, "of facing him and crumbling, of not being strong enough." Isaac took her hand in his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Katherine Foster, you stood up in front of an entire church and confronted the man who betrayed you. You survived alone in the wilderness rather than accept his humiliation. You are the strongest person I've ever met." Katherine looked up, startled by the intensity in his voice. Their faces were close, too close for propriety, but propriety seemed a distant concern now. "Why are you helping me, Isaac, really?" she whispered. "At first it was about revenge," he answered honestly, "using you to get to Thomas. And now," Isaac's eyes softened, "now I want to see you get justice. I want to see you rebuild your life on your terms, not his." The honesty of his answer moved her more than pretty words could have. Katherine leaned forward slightly, drawn by something she couldn't name. Isaac stood abruptly, breaking the moment. "We should rest. Tomorrow will test us both." As he arranged his bedroll on the floor, Katherine watched him, wondering at the strange partnership they had formed. Stranger still was the disappointment she felt when he pulled away from her. The day of the party dawned clear and bright. Katherine dressed carefully in the maid's uniform Lucy had provided, pinning her hair severely back and adding a cap to complete the disguise. Isaac would be working in the stables, positioned to help her escape if needed. "Remember," Isaac said as they prepared to leave separately, "if anything goes wrong, abandon the plan. Your safety matters more than revenge." Katherine nodded, touched by his concern. "I'll be careful." Lucy picked Katherine up in her carriage at the edge of town, James having gone ahead with some business associates. As they approached the Double B Ranch, Katherine's heart began to race. The familiar landscape brought back memories both sweet and bitter. Her arrival as a bride, full of hope. The gradual disillusionment as Thomas's true nature emerged. The final humiliation of his betrayal. "Are you sure about this?" Lucy asked, noticing her friend's pale face. Katherine squared her shoulders. "Absolutely." The ranch house was ablaze with light as they arrived, lanterns hanging from the porch eaves and music spilling from the open windows. Katherine kept her head down as she helped Lucy from the carriage, playing the part of an attentive lady's maid. Inside, the house had been transformed. New furniture filled the parlor, and expensive decorations adorned the walls. Katherine felt a surge of anger. Thomas had always claimed they couldn't afford such luxuries when she had lived here. As Lucy mingled with the other guests, Katherine circulated with a tray of drinks, keeping her face averted from Thomas and Eliza, who were holding court in the center of the room. She overheard snippets of conversation, most centered on the town's most scandalous topic. Can you imagine showing up in her old wedding dress? Thomas says she'd been acting strangely for months. Poor Eliza, having to deal with such drama right before her own wedding. Katherine gritted her teeth and continued her rounds, gradually working her way toward Thomas's study at the back of the house. According to their plan, she would slip away when the dinner was announced, using the distraction to search the study for incriminating documents. The moment came sooner than expected. Howard Thornton stood to make a toast to the happy couple, drawing all eyes to the center of the room. Katherine set down her tray and slipped into the hallway, her heart pounding. The study door was locked, but Katherine had anticipated this. She removed a hairpin from beneath her cap and inserted it into the lock, using the technique Isaac had taught her over the past week. After a tense minute, she felt the satisfying click of the mechanism releasing. Inside the study, Katherine moved quickly to the painting behind Thomas's desk, a landscape of the New Mexico territory that concealed his wall safe. She swung the painting aside and faced the combination lock. Thomas had been careless during their marriage, not bothering to hide the combination from her. He had used the same sequence of numbers for everything the date they had met. Katherine turned the dial with trembling fingers, praying he hadn't changed it. The safe opened with a soft click. Katherine let out a relieved breath and began rifling through the papers inside. Land deeds, banknotes, contracts. She stuffed the most important-looking documents into a cloth bag hidden beneath her apron. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the study door open. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Katherine froze, then slowly turned to face the voice she knew so well. Thomas Bailey stood in the doorway, his handsome face contorted with anger. He was dressed in his finest suit, a gold watch chain glinting across his vest. Katherine. Confusion replaced anger for a moment as he recognized her beneath the maid's cap. Then his expression hardened again. "I should have known you'd try something like this. Always were too clever for your own good." Katherine straightened, clutching the bag of documents. "Hello, Thomas." Enjoying married life the second time around, Thomas stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "You've lost your mind. Breaking into my home, stealing my papers. I could have you arrested." "They're not all your papers, though, are they?" Katherine replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Some of them rightfully belong to the partner you left for dead 5 years ago." Thomas went very still. "What are you talking about?" "Isaac Aldridge," Katherine said, watching the color drain from Thomas's face. "He's alive, Thomas, and he wants what you stole from him." Thomas lunged forward suddenly, grabbing Katherine's wrist with bruising force. "You're lying. Aldridge is dead." "Let me go," Katherine demanded, trying to pull away. "Not until you tell me what game you're playing," Thomas hissed, his grip tightening. "Who put you up to this? Who's been filling your head with lies?" The study door burst open, and Isaac stood there, his revolver aimed steadily at Thomas's chest. "She asked you to let her go," Isaac said, his voice deadly quiet. Thomas's eyes widened in shock. "Aldridge, it can't be." "It's been a long time, partner," Isaac said, stepping into the room. "Now take your hands off the lady before I put a bullet in you." Thomas released Katherine's wrist, his face pale. "You're supposed to be dead." "Sorry to disappoint," Isaac replied. "Katherine, come here." She moved to Isaac's side, the bag of documents still clutched in her hand. The three of them stood frozen in a tableau of betrayal and revenge, the sounds of the party a distant murmur through the closed door. "You won't get away with this," Thomas said, his confident mask slipping back into place. "This is my home, my town. One shout from me, and 20 men will come running." "Go ahead and shout," Katherine challenged. "Explain to your guests why your ex-wife and the partner you tried to murder are in your study with documents proving your fraud." Thomas's eyes darted between them. "What do you want?" "Everything you took from us," Isaac said, starting with a signed confession about the silver claim. Thomas laughed bitterly. "And why would I do that?" Katherine reached into the bag and pulled out a particular document. "Because I found the real deed to this ranch, Thomas. The one showing you mortgaged it to Howard Thornton for a fraction of its value. What would your new father-in-law say if he knew you'd lied about the ranch's worth? That you're nearly bankrupt?" The color drained from Thomas's face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Katherine held up the document. "Shall we go ask him? He's right outside." Thomas moved to his desk on unsteady legs, sinking into the chair. "What exactly do you want me to write?" Isaac dictated the terms, a full confession of how Thomas had stolen the silver claim, leaving Isaac for dead, and a transfer of half the value of the claim with interest to Isaac. In addition, Thomas would sign over half the ranch to Katherine as settlement for their marriage. "This is robbery," Thomas muttered as he wrote. "No," Katherine said quietly, "this is justice." When Thomas finished writing, Isaac took the confession and folded it carefully. "One more thing. You're going to accompany us outside. You'll tell anyone who sees us that you were just showing old friends around the property. Then you'll watch us ride away. If you alert anyone or try to stop us, these documents go straight to the sheriff and Howard Thornton." Thomas glared at them with pure hatred, but nodded stiffly. "Let's get this over with." They left the study together, Thomas walking between them like a prisoner being escorted. As they passed through the kitchen, a serving girl looked up in surprise, but Thomas waved her away with forced casualness. Outside, the cool night air hit Katherine's face, bringing with it a sense of liberation. Isaac had 2 horses waiting behind the barn, saddled and ready. The stable boy who had helped him, a young man who had suffered under Thomas's harsh management, nodded respectfully as they approached. "Remember, Thomas," Isaac said as they prepared to mount, "one word from you before we're clear of the property, and everything you've built comes crashing down." Thomas stood rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. "This isn't over, Aldridge." "Yes, it is," Katherine said, looking at her former husband with pity rather than anger. "Goodbye, Thomas." As they rode away from the Double B Ranch, Katherine felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. They rode hard for several hours, putting distance between themselves and Silver Creek, finally stopping to make camp near a small stream when the horses needed rest. "We did it," Katherine said in wonder as they sat beside a small fire. "We actually did it." Isaac smiled, the firelight softening the scar on his jaw. "You were magnificent." The look on Thomas's face when you pulled out that mortgage document. Katherine laughed, the sound startling in its freedom. "I wasn't even sure what it was until I saw his reaction." They fell silent, the enormity of the night's events settling over them. Katherine looked at the stars above, so much brighter away from town. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Isaac turned to face her. "That depends on you. With your share of the ranch and my share of the silver claim, we both have means to start over. You could go east, like you mentioned. Open a school, perhaps. And you," Katherine held her breath, suddenly afraid of his answer. "I thought I might head to Colorado. There's good ranching land there, they say." Isaac hesitated. Unless, Katherine prompted when he didn't continue. Isaac moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Unless I had a reason to stay in the territory." Katherine looked into his eyes, seeing the question there. "I think," she said slowly, "that I've had enough of the East. I've grown rather fond of the western sky." Isaac's smile was like sunrise breaking. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a hunger that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, Katherine rested her forehead against his. "I never thought I could feel this way again, trust someone again." "I'll earn that trust every day," Isaac promised, "if you'll let me." "I will," Katherine whispered. "I do." 3 months later, Katherine stood on the porch of a modest but comfortable ranch house, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and crimson. The Double K Ranch, named for Katherine and her new husband, was taking shape around her. The house was finished, and the barn nearly so. A small herd of cattle grazed in the distance, the beginning of what they hoped would be a prosperous operation. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. Isaac rode toward the house, returning from a trip to Silver Creek. He dismounted with that same fluid grace that had first caught her attention in Rattlesnake Canyon, hanging his hat on the porch post before climbing the steps to greet her. "Any news?" Katherine asked as he drew her into his arms. "Thomas and Eliza have left the territory," Isaac reported. "Seems Howard Thornton finally discovered the extent of his son-in-law's deception. They've gone to California from what I hear." Katherine nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. "And the ranch, Thornton has taken possession. He's selling it off in parcels." Isaac brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I bought the southern section, the part with the creek where you used to go reading." Katherine's eyes widened. "You didn't tell me you were planning that, wanted it to be a surprise." Isaac grinned. "Happy 3-month anniversary." Katherine laughed and kissed him soundly. "You're impossible." "Impossibly in love with you," he countered, leading her inside as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, so different from the cold grandeur of the Double B Ranch. They had built it together, planning each room, each window to capture the beauty of the land around them. It wasn't large or luxurious, but it was theirs, honestly earned and shared equally. As they prepared supper together, Katherine reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. Thomas's betrayal, which had seemed like the end of her world, had actually been the beginning of something far more precious. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About how sometimes our greatest losses lead us to our greatest gains," Katherine replied. She took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach. "And about how the Double K Ranch is going to need a bigger house in about 7 months." Isaac's eyes widened as her meaning registered. "Katherine, are you saying?" She nodded, tears of joy brimming in her eyes. "We're going to have a baby." Isaac let out a whoop of joy that surely startled the cattle grazing nearby. He lifted Katherine off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her down gently, suddenly concerned. "Should I be doing that? Is it safe for the baby?" Katherine laughed. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass." Isaac placed his hand on her stomach again, wonder written across his features. "A family," he said softly. "Our family." Katherine covered his hand with hers. "When Thomas took another bride, I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was just beginning. When I said I'd take his greatest loss, I had no idea what a treasure I was gaining," Isaac replied, drawing her close. As they stood in the warm kitchen of their new home, the future stretching before them like the vast New Mexico sky, Katherine knew that sometimes the end of one dream made room for a better one to take root. Thomas had discarded her for ambition and greed, but in doing so, he had inadvertently given her the greatest gift, freedom to find true love with a man who valued her as an equal partner, not a possession. Outside, The stars continued their ancient dance across the heavens, bearing witness to the simple truth that sometimes justice and love arrive hand in hand, changing lives in ways no one could have predicted. By the time their child was born, a daughter they named Elizabeth Martha Aldridge, the Double K Ranch had become known throughout the territory for its fair dealing and quality stock. Isaac's reputation as an honest rancher and Katherine's background as a teacher made them respected figures in the community. They established a small school on their property for the children of their workers and neighbors, with Katherine teaching 3 days a week when Elizabeth was old enough to be watched by their trusted housekeeper, Rosa. News occasionally reached them about Thomas and Eliza. Their fortunes had continued to decline in California, with Thomas's schemes repeatedly failing to produce the wealth he sought. Howard Thornton had ultimately disowned his daughter for marrying such a reprobate, cutting the couple off entirely. "You ever regret how things turned out?" Isaac asked Katherine one evening as they sat on their porch, watching 5-year-old Elizabeth play with her new puppy in the yard. Katherine looked at her husband, the lines around his eyes deepened by years of working in the sun, the scar along his jaw now as familiar to her as her own reflection. "Never," she said honestly, "not for a single moment." Isaac took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm in a gesture that still made her heart flutter after 6 years of marriage. "Nor I," he said. "Thomas Bailey did us both a favor, though he never intended to." Elizabeth ran up to the porch then, her dark hair so like Isaac's flying behind her, the puppy bounding at her heels. "Papa, can you help me build a house for Ranger? A small one, just his size." Isaac scooped his daughter into his arms. "Of course, Lizzie girl, first thing tomorrow." As Katherine watched her husband and daughter head inside, the puppy scampering after them, she thought about how life's greatest pain sometimes led to its greatest joy. Her husband had taken another bride, and the cowboy had indeed taken his greatest loss, but in doing so, he had given Katherine a life richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined on that desperate day in Rattlesnake Canyon. And that, she reflected as she rose to join her family inside their home, was a justice more perfect than any revenge could ever be.